Hey guys, Mr. Edwards here, Centreville High School Automotive Technology. Today we're working on a BMW 2009 BMW 3 Series 328xi. BMWs are always fun to work on, or not. But we got some brakes to do on this thing, so we're going to be doing rear disc brakes. New pads, new rotors. Thought I'd take you guys along for the ride. Let's head on back to the back of the car. Alright, so first thing that you guys would want to do, obviously, get the car supported off the ground, whether that be on a lift or if you're working at home like I am, floor jack and jack stands, just so the wheels are off the ground and everything's nice and secure and safe, car's not going to fall on us. And we got to pull the rear wheels off the car. Alright, so we got our impact gun here. One thing about European cars, German cars in particular, like BMWs, Mercedes, Volkswagens, Audis, they are an exception to the rule that I've preached to you guys about lug nuts being either 19 or 21 millimeter. Most German cars, the lug nuts are, if you can read that right there, 17 millimeters. So that's a little bit of an exception to that rule, but we got 17 millimeter lug nuts on here. Let's get these wheels off. Another fun fact about German cars, the lug nuts and the studs are integrated together on them. There's nothing holding this wheel in place once I knock it loose. It's a little corroded on there, but it's going to come falling off the car. There's no studs for it to slide onto. They come off with the lug nuts. So if you have a wheel that's corroded in place like this, where I've got all my lug nuts off of it, and it's still sitting up here on the car, you can try just hitting on it in a few places, and if it still doesn't want to come loose, that's when you break out the big guns. To do this though, I need to be really careful. I'm going to take one of my lug nuts and thread it back on the bottom, just a few threads by hand, just like that. That's enough that when I knock this wheel loose, it's going to prevent it from hitting me in the head, going through the wall next to me, and whatever's beyond that, because I'm going to be hitting on it pretty good. The other thing, I'm going to be hitting on the back of the wheel out towards me. I want to hit on the tire, not on the rim. These are nice aluminum alloy rims. I don't want to hit these with a 4-pound sledgehammer and potentially damage a really expensive rim. I want to hit on the tire on the inside. And they'll pop loose just like that. Notice that lug nut stopped it from falling off and whacking me in the head. Same thing over here on the other side where this wheel's still stuck on here as well. Thread it on just a few threads by hand, hit on the inside of the tire, not the rim. And it'll pop loose. Now that we got our wheels off, we can take a look here at our BMW's rear disc brake setup. Rear disc brakes on most cars are very similar to front disc brakes with some minor differences. Because this is a German car with terrific German engineering, we don't have wheel studs sticking out here. All we've got is the rotor, and the actual lug nuts and studs go through the rotor. We've got our bracket, we've got our caliper, and then we've got our outer and inner brake pads inside the bracket. We've got to get our caliper off to be able to get to our pads, get our bracket off so we can pop our rotor off. First thing that we have to take off though on this is the spring right here. It's a little bit of a unique design, but actually quite a few cars have similar designs. This little spring right here keeps tension on the caliper, holding it up to the bracket. So to get this spring off here, I need to take the tension off of it. That popped off quicker than most of them do, but all I did was I took a flathead screwdriver and pushed back on it. It releases the tension on it, and then usually you can just wiggle it off. This one came flying off towards me. That's why we wear safety glasses. That came flying towards my head. I wouldn't want that sticking out of my eye. So now I need to get my caliper off so that I can pop my brake pads out and get the bracket off as well. Remember, there's the upper and lower slide pin bolts for the caliper, and then the upper and lower bigger bolts for the bracket. To get those bolts off is a little bit trickier on rear disc brakes because unlike the front where we can turn the wheel to kind of give us better access, on the rear we're stuck with it being straight ahead, and we got to kind of work blind with the bolts working towards us. But for these upper and lower slide pin bolts here, there's these little plastic caps on them, and usually you can reach back here and pop them off with your hand. If they don't want to pop off with my hand, I can come in here with a flathead screwdriver and pop them off. But they cover up where the actual bolt goes in. One on the top, and one on the bottom. Set those off to the side. Now, our slide pin bolts are actually Allen keyed, so they don't have an actual regular bolt head, but they have an inverted hex head on them, so I have to use an Allen key socket. For these ones in particular, a 7mm Allen. Make sure, again, these bolts are coming towards me just like with front disc brakes, so before I go in there I want to make sure I'm loosening. Lefty-loosey, it clicks when I'm going to the right because that's not doing any force. Turn it to the left, it's loosening because it's going to feel like I'm going to the right because the bolt's coming towards me. Get them broken loose, and there is not much room back here. And the bottom one too. Now with both of those slide pins loose, I can wiggle on my caliper here and it should slide out just like that. The brake pads actually stay inside of it because of how they clip in, and I can pop them out of the caliper here in just a minute. But for now, I'm just going to set this whole thing off to the side, grab a hook, and hook it up out of the way so we don't damage our brake hose at all. Got my former coat hanger, now caliper hook. I'll hook it through my caliper and then hook it to the shock over here so it's tucked out of the way and there's no weight on my brake hose. Now I need to pull my bracket off here so I can clean it up and get my old rotor off. The way that I'm going to do that, because space is so tight back in here, the bolts that hold it on the top and bottom are 16mm. I've got a 16mm flex impact socket on my compact 3/8 impact gun, and I'm going to come back here in the back, make sure I'm loosening, come back there and buzz those bolts out. There's one. Set that off to the side so we don't mix it up. And there's the second one, and my bracket. Now, I need to get my rotor off of here, and that's probably not going to be too fun because look at all this rust and corrosion built up around the lip that it goes over the hub on. But we'll get it off of there. One thing though, you'll stand here for 3 days beating on this thing trying to get it off and not get it off if you don't take that out right there. What that is a factory retaining bolt that they actually put in it to hold it onto the hub when they're putting the car together at the factory. You need to take this bolt out because it is holding the rotor onto the hub right now. To get this bolt out, it's another Allen key bolt, so you need another Allen socket. It's smaller, but make sure that that fits all the way in there. And if you try to use a ratchet and turn on this thing, you're gonna spend 3 days fighting it because the whole thing's gonna spin round and round and round. These bolts are in there tight. Again, for this purpose, we're gonna use our 3/8 little zippy impact gun. Get on there, buzz that bolt right out. Now to get this rotor off, we wanna try and not damage the braking surface of it if we were going to resurface the rotor, so we don't want to hit on that with a sledgehammer. In this case, we're going to replace the rotors, so it doesn't really matter what we hit as long as we get it off of there. But if we were going to take these rotors and put them on a brake lathe and resurface them like we did to that other car we did the front disc brakes on, we would want to hit on the middle part of the rotor here to get it off, the hat of the rotor. In this case, because we're just replacing them, I just hit on the thing until it comes loose. And notice all that corrosion and everything that was around there was really holding this thing on. So I take my old rotor and set it off to the side. I don't need it anymore. We need to clean up this hub face here so that our new rotor sits nice and flush on a clean hub. We're going to do that with our wire brush and brake clean in just a minute. But take a look up inside of here, guys. What does all this look like to you? Looks like a drum brake system, right? Why would there be drum brakes inside of a disc brake system? Well, that's for the parking brake or the emergency brake. That's that extra braking system that you have to have for if your service brakes fail. This is how on a lot of rear disc brake cars, the parking brake is set up. Some of them, it's integrated into the actual caliper and the normal rear brakes, but on these particular cars, it's a separate drum brake system that is inside the rear disc rotor. So while you guys have the rear rotor off, it's a good idea to just inspect everything here. Make sure your rear shoes look in good shape for your parking brake. These look almost brand new. Same thing with our trailing shoe back here. We don't have any springs that are broken or anything. This all looks in good shape, but it's a great time to inspect that stuff, because if you see pieces hanging off of here, that's one thing that we got to tell the customer, hey man, I'd take care of this while everything's taken apart. Alright, so now I'm going to spray my hub down real good. That way anything that's dust, on there won't become airborne, and I'll breathe it in. And then come over here with a wire brush and scrub real good to get all that corrosion and rust off of there all the way around the hub. Much better. So we've got ourselves a nice brand new brake rotor here now. And when you have brake rotors, in most cases, when you get them out of the box, they're going to have an oily coating on them, and that's called cosmoline. The purpose of that oily coating, when the rotor's sitting in the box on the shelf of the auto parts store for months and months and months potentially, it prevents the rotor from rusting. That's great because we get ourselves a nice shiny brand new looking brake rotor here, but we don't want to put it on the car with that oil coating on the braking surface of the rotor, because oil and stopping at 60 miles an hour don't get along very well. So we need to take ourselves some brake clean and spray off both sides of the rotor real good and wipe them down. That's going to get that oily coating, the cosmoline, off of the rotor so that we don't have any issues with stopping once we're going down the road. Flip the rotor over and do the exact same thing. And for rear disc brakes that have an integral drum system for the parking brake, do the inside as well, because that matters too. Now I need to clean up my caliper bracket. It's got rust and crust and brake dust and all kinds of good stuff on it that we don't want. So we're going to take it, spray it with some brake clean, and then take our handy wire brush and scrub it off real good. Get it all nice and cleaned up. Same thing on the other side. And we're all good to go. Nice clean metal now to have our new brake pads made up with. Now I've got my nice new rotor ready to go on here. Because there's no studs that stick out of here like a typical wheel hub would have, the rotor can just spin free. We don't want to get it lined up in the wrong spot, so that's where this assembly screw that we had to take out comes in. I've got it on the Allen socket here, and I want to line up this one hole that doesn't match the other 5 wheel stud holes up with the hole for this screw and get that started on there, always by hand of course. Make sure everything lines up good so that my rotor's in the right spot and gets pulled all the way onto the hub. That should be good. And the rotor's on. Next thing I need to do up here in the front of the rotor is get my bracket put back on. So we want to get these bolts in the back. Remember, they're 16 millimeters. Get them started by hand. While I'm doing that, I'll tell you guys an interesting story about this car. This guy had this car in just for regular service at a shop that specializes in European cars. And they told him that he needed brakes, which obviously he did, and a couple other things. And they quoted him a way high amount, which is to be expected for European cars, BMWs, Mercedes, Audi, all those expensive cars, but still just crazy for just basically for brakes. So he came to me and said, hey man, you know, is this something you can take care of? And I said, sure, absolutely, you know, and for not nearly that much money. So that just shows you guys, I mean, these cars are not cheap to maintain or repair. It was a crazy amount of money just for brakes. Now we'll get back here with our impact and our flex socket on these bracket bolts and tighten them up. One, and the compressor. Alright, now that I got that stupid compressor off, we'll get the top bolt tight, and our bracket is all good to go. Alright, so I am ready to get my caliper serviced and ready to go back on the bracket here with our new brake pads here in a minute. I popped out the old outer brake pad, and as you guys can see, all this is the metal backing plate. All that's left of the pad material is that little sliver right there, and I'll get the camera to zoom. A couple more good presses of the brake pedal and this guy would have not been feeling real good. He would have had some nice metal on metal brakes, so it was definitely time to change these out. Alright, so now I need to unhook my caliper here and bring it down so that I can start getting it ready to go back on the car. And first thing I'm going to do is push my piston back in on it with our caliper piston tool. I'm going to do that while the old brake pad is still up inside of it there that you guys can see, so that we don't damage our piston. And we will get that squeezed back up in there. Oop. Just like that. So the piston's pushed all the way back in now. Now, I need to pop my old brake pad out of here, but one thing that's unique about BMWs is that they have a low brake pad sensor on them. So when the brakes get real thin, there's an electronic sensor that's part of the brake pads that shorts out and turns on a light on the dashboard saying, hey man, change your brakes. And we need to swap that sensor out with these new brakes as well. That sensor is part of this inside brake pad here. In fact, you guys can see it on camera. It's this piece right back here I'm pointing at right there. And so that's going to come out with this old brake pad, and we need to put a new one on our new inside brake pad. The way this inside brake pad comes out, it clips inside the piston of the caliper, so you just have to kind of wiggle on it and pull out, pop it around some, and it'll pop out just like that. Now, that sensor that goes to the inside brake pad right here comes through the window on the back of the caliper. This is the wire for it. Loops around here and then goes down. We need to follow this wire so that we can unplug it and swap it out with a new one. First, it goes through this little clip right here with the cap for the bleeder valve, so we'll unclip that and follow our wire. So if you follow the wire, it kind of goes down and around town and around the shock there, goes up, around, and then comes up here, and this is the wire right here, and goes up behind the fender liner. And behind the fender liner up there is where there's going to be a electrical connector where it all hooks together. So we need to take off a couple of plastic nuts down the side over here, and then the one right there, and pull this fender liner back. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll take our fender liner here and kind of tuck it back and up out of the way. Dust and dirt and everything falling on our heads. And if you guys look up inside of there, that white connector, I'll move you guys in so you can see better. Tuck this liner out of the way a little better. This white electrical connector is where our brake pad sensor plugs in. We just gotta squeeze the end of it here and pop it out. I need 3 hands for this, dude. There we go. Unplugged. And now I gotta fish our wire through some clips and stuff and back around town here. And once we do that, and once we have it fished around here, we can actually pull it through the back of our caliper. Just like that. All that for a brake pad. So the way that this sensor works on these is when the brake pad material right here gets thin enough, it is actually part of the brake pad. You know, it's in line with the brake pad material, and it gets cut by the brake rotor. When you step on the brakes, you know, the pad material wears away and it starts to wear away too. And when it gets cut into like this, it shorts out. And when it shorts out, it turns on a little light on the dashboard saying, you got a problem, dude. So these brakes, they were toast. Now with our caliper here, we need to take our slide pins out of it one at a time. Unlike the last car we worked on where the slide pins were part of the bracket and we cleaned them when we were cleaning up the bracket, these ones just go straight through the caliper. So we'll slide them out, clean them up real good with a rag, grease them up. Remember, we're doing one by one so you don't mix them up. So here's one slide pin that's cleaned up and greased up with just a nice little slight coating of grease. We'll slide it back up in the caliper, not all the way through because we need to have space to be able to put the caliper back on, but get it back up in there, and we'll pop up our outer slide pin, clean it up too. Got it nice and greased up now, and we'll slide it back in to the caliper. Just like that. Now, our caliper itself, on the piston, we want to just wipe off the surface of the piston because the brake pad actually mates up with it and goes inside of it. We don't want there to be any dust, dirt, debris up inside of there. Our new brake pads for this car, unlike the Camry that we worked on a few days ago, are different from each other. One of them has this big metal spring clip on it. That's where it goes. This is the inside brake pad where it goes inside the caliper piston. And then this one doesn't have that, and that just sits on the outside. This is our outer brake pad. So obviously you need to make sure these brake pads go to the correct side. So again, we're just going to take and put a nice little light coating of grease on all the metal to metal contact points for our brake pads. So those ears that are on both ends of the brake pad, just a little bit of grease on the contact points of them so they slide nice and smooth. Same thing with our other brake pad. Good to go. Now, for my outer brake pad, because it doesn't have any sensor or anything and it doesn't go into the caliper, I literally just take it and set it in there, just like that. That's perfect. For my inner brake pad, I need to come up here and get my caliper. And it sits actually down inside the caliper. The spring goes inside the piston of the caliper, which is hard to do at first because the spring does not want to just slide in. And with a little bit of wiggling, brake pad will pop in just like that. Now we need to push our slide pins back so they aren't sticking all the way through like that, so that we can slide our caliper back in place with our brake pads here. Just like that. And we can push our slide pins forward. And I just want to get them started by hand, just get the threads started. I'm not going to tighten them all the way down yet, because I still want to get my electrical sensor put on. So we'll come back here with our Allen socket and just get it in the slide pin bolts and get the threads for them just started, so our caliper is at least held in place here. Now I need to come in here with my new brake pad sensor, and notice this one, the end of it's not all cut off by the brake pad being too thin, and it'll just clip onto that inside brake pad. Now, as soon as you push this on there and these little metal ears get clipped into place, it's on there permanently. That's why we had to fish the old one out with the brake pad. The only way you get it back off is to break it off. So make sure you have it on there the correct direction. You don't have it facing the wrong way, because then the wire won't reach. You have it on there facing the right way, and you clip it on correctly, because once it's on, it's on. So we've got our new sensor clipped on the inside pad now. We need to take our wire and fish it back up around through the rear suspension and up to that connector in the rear fender liner. So that wire goes up along the rear trailing arm here, through a couple of plastic clips, around behind the shock, and then comes out over here. And we're going to come up behind the fender liner and plug it in now. Pull our fender liner back out of the way. Find the other end of our connector right here. Make sure everything lines up good with the pins in it. And pop her into place. Just like that. All good to go. Now we'll come back up in the little housing for it and make sure it clicks into place good. Just like that. And obviously we need to go ahead here and put our fender liner back on good. So we got the one plastic nut that goes in the front here. Make sure that gets started good. And all the 8mm bolts over here on the side. We'll get all them started by hand and then tighten them up. One, two, three, and the one down on the bottom. And our fender liner is all good now. Now back to our brakes themselves. Now that our fender liner is put back in and our new sensor is plugged back in and plugged onto our new brake pads, we're going to go ahead and tighten up the upper and lower slide pin bolts that actually hold the caliper on, and we're almost ready to go here. Get them good and tight. German torque spec, gut and tight. Same thing down on the bottom. Good and tight. Tight as we can get it. Now we'll go ahead and put these little plastic caps back over top of the slide pins on the back. And the last step that we've got to do is to put this spring back on that keeps tension on the front of the caliper. This can be kind of tricky, and you guys might even see me struggle with it a little bit, but the best way that I can tell you to get it on is to start with one end of it. I usually start with the top, then do the bottom, because you got to kind of wrestle with it to get this thing on there. And eventually you will get it, but it can be tricky. So I got it kind of started here. I'm going to try and tap it into place. Just like that. Perfect. So now we've got nice new rear disc brakes on this car. Nice new rotors, new pads. We serviced our bracket and our caliper. Put a new wear sensor on it so that dash light won't be on telling us we need to worry about our brakes anymore. And we should be all good to go. And of course over here on the driver's side, we did the exact same thing. Nice brand new rotor held on there. Some nice brand new brake pads. We are all good to go over here too. So now remember, the key to finishing any good brake job, or having the wheels off the car in general for that matter, is torquing the lug nuts to factory specifications. In this case, it's 100 foot-pounds. So we'll tighten them with a torque stick in a star pattern. And the other side. And of course, once we get the car down on the ground, finish them with a torque wrench. Make sure they are absolutely tightened to factory specifications, so we don't have any over-tightened or under-tightened lug nuts. And of course, the final and honestly one of the most important, certainly safety-wise, steps when you're done. Hop in the car, fire it up. Grab the key and fire it up. And when you first step on the brake pedal, it's just going to sink all the way to the floor. You've got to pump it a few times until it feels normal. Remember, it's got to suck all that fluid back down into the caliper pistons all over, and until you pump up the brake pedal a few times, you're going to have no brakes. Now we have brakes. Okay guys, well, that about does it for our 2009 BMW 328i, 328xi. We took care of the rear brakes on it, new pads, new rotors, new wear sensors. Things all good to go down the road and be nice and safe for its owner now. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the video. Make sure you fill out your reflection sheet that goes along with it, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Thanks for watching.